Welcome back to the MizzouToday Show, powered by On3 and Rivals. I'm your host, Kenny Van Doren, always joined by senior editor of MizzouToday, Kyle McAreavy. Did I do it? Let's go. I got it right this time. Still practicing that. Still practicing my pronunciation, of course, with Kyle's. It's a good last name, Kyle. I mean, a good Nick last name, MC, and I just have been saying it wrong for almost a year. We met at the end of September, early October last year. We took these jobs, and I was saying it wrong forever. So it's going to be a little while before I iron that out.
Yeah, it's all right. It sticks out. It's not one you hear a lot, which isn't too bad because it makes me easily Googleable if you're able to spell it correctly.
Exactly. And I originally thought it was MCCCA. And then so I think that's what kind of threw me for a loop a couple of those times. So still ironing that out. But a team that doesn't really need to iron out much right now is Missouri. Big win over Louisiana in week 3, 52-10. We'll touch on that real quick before we get into the nitty gritty of South Carolina week 4 opening SEC play. Kyle, I know you had a couple points you wanted to point out just about Mizzou against Cupcakes in the past, against these blood donor schools that they're paying to come and play them. And what can you kind of just say about the meaning of this win? Because I think in the end of the day, you expect to win these games, but Mizzou really handled Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of stuck out how dominant that performance was. I mean, Mizzou looked great against Central Arkansas. It was kind of the case last year where a lot of the blood donor games were pretty easy, right? But that hasn't always been the case for Mizzou. I pulled up just a couple of, just from the last handful of years. There was a 10-point win against Central Michigan in 2021, 17-point win against Abilene Christian in 2022, and then, of course, the 4-point win against Middle Tennessee in 2023 that, right before that season really kicked into gear. Like these games look really easy when you put them on the schedule, and they're there to be an auto win, right? For the most part. But Mizzou handled its business really well in a way that you don't always see. And a lot of teams, even this year, haven't had, that level of success. And Mizzou just start to finish dominant. I mean, there was 2 plays in the game. The 84-yard rushing touchdown allowed and the interception by Bo Prabula. And other than that, I thought Mizzou won across the field basically every single play.
I think you always go back to that Middle Tennessee State game in 2023. And that was a good season for the Tigers. That was a 10-win season. You go to the Cotton Bowl, you win that. That was a big year for the Tigers, 11 wins, in that one. And so I think, coming out of it, this is a, good sign. It's a good tune-up for SEC play, and that's where we're going to go from there. Talking about the South Carolina Gamecocks coming in for the Memorial or the Columbia Cup, Mayor's Cup in this one. Memorial Stadium, 6 p.m. on Saturday on ESPN. It's a blackout game and the 16th consecutive home sellout for the Tigers. This is a big deal, but it's coming in, as a game that maybe a lot of people have shifted odds in this one. South Carolina, Mizzou, I think at one point was, 2-score favorite coming into this game by BetMGM, the betting partner of On3. What can you kind of just tell us about LaNorris Sellers? Because, of course, Pete Nakos did report that LaNorris Sellers did suffer a concussion in week 3 against Vanderbilt in that loss at home for the Gamecocks. But there really wasn't an update this week from Shane Beamer, and we can get into that as well, just on maybe how the availability report looks moving forward.
Yeah, so I think that opening line was kind of under the expectation that Sellers would not play, and then maybe even that Dylan Stewart, the star edge rusher over at South Carolina, was going to be suspended for a half. There was questions about that Saturday night after he was ejected from the Vanderbilt game. With Sellers specifically, it seems like the Tigers are preparing for him to be the guy. I mean, there's an argument to be made kind of similar to the Texas A&M game last year, where if you don't know who you're going up against, maybe you should prepare for both. I think this is a different situation than that game because Texas A&M ran 2 pretty different offenses between Marcel Reed and Connor Weigman. So when you, at the time last year, prepared for Marcel Reed and you got the Connor Weigman offense, it was just different than what you were preparing for all week. This with Luke Doty, not sure how to pronounce his last name. The offense looked pretty similar when he came in last week after Sellers exited. He's still a very athletic guy, was playing receiver before. He's going to get outside the pocket. He's going to scramble and maybe do some design runs. We'll see. And he can throw it around the field. So it doesn't change that much. So I think it's probably the right move to just prepare for Sellers. And then if the offense is a little less talented without him, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a huge change. Or for Mizzou, it's not a bad thing. But the team expectation right now is the Tigers will be facing LaNorris Sellers. And because I brought him up, Dylan Stewart does get to play the whole game, according to Shane Beamer. He got a call Saturday night or Sunday morning from the SEC saying he was good to go.
And what happened there, too, with Dylan Stewart is that he pushed an offensive lineman after a play, just kind of got tangled up with him. And I mean, something got exchanged and got ejected from that game. There's sometimes a difference between like the fighting and the, just ejection for unsportsmanlike. So he'll stick around and play that entire game against Mizzou, which is a big deal because I think we should just kind of pivot into the top three South Carolina players to know going this game. Of course, there's going to be other contributors, other guys flying around the field that will catch your eye. But these are three guys that stand out to Kyle and I going into this one. We'll start with Dylan Stewart. He started 11 of 13 games last year as a true freshman in the South Carolina defense. I was looking at it, we were talking about before we got on here. I was like, did he play against Mizzou last year? Because it's not on his ESPN page, but when you go to his actual South Carolina player card, he did play against Mizzou, just did not record any stats in this one. But he's been known, it's been talked about very highly going into this season, especially going into his freshman season as a big-time recruit. What do the Tigers, have to do to kind of stop a guy like Dylan Stewart?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the best edge rushers in the country. He was already last year as a true freshman. I mean, to come in as a true freshman, go into a tough position in the SEC and immediately become a pretty dominant player is a big ask. He had huge expectations coming into this year. It hasn't been an astounding performance through 3 games. I think he's got 2 sacks and like 5 hurries, something like 5 or 6 hurries credited by PFF, which is still good, but like not, one of the best edge rushers in the country good. I think, this is the best edge rusher that Mizzou's offensive line has gone up against to this point in the year. But he's going to line up, outside pretty much every time, or has, I believe, every time so far this season. And that means he's going against one of the tackles. And the last couple of weeks, Mizzou's tackles have been pretty solid. I mean, especially in pass protection, there have been some issues along the line still, but the Caden Green at left tackle and Keegan Trost at right tackle have been fantastic.
Another sophomore to know will move to the offensive side of the ball now is Nick Harbor. This is a name that the junior now. But it's probably a name, some Mizzou fans will know, some just SEC fans will know because of, what he's been able to do and stretch the field. He had 2 catches for 69 yards in that 2024 matchup in Columbia, South Carolina. His longest was for 43 yards. He had a touchdown in this game as well. What's a guy like Nick Harbor kind of do to the secondary, which improved a lot, by PFF standards this past week against Louisiana?
Yeah, I think the thing to know for Mizzou fans who don't know much about Nick Harbor is he's kind of talked about the way Marquise Johnson's talked about with Mizzou fans. Like he's going to be the fastest guy on the field a lot of the time, and he's able to take the top off of just about any defense. I would say, yeah, the Mizzou secondary was credited with a pretty great performance against Louisiana, had a pretty great performance. Can't really argue that when you only allow 4 passing yards. But South Carolina is a much better passing attack than Louisiana and isn't going to be outmatched in that same way. The Tigers ran basically just man coverage all day against Louisiana because the secondary is just bigger, faster, stronger than any of the receivers that they were going up against. You can't do that against South Carolina because a guy like Nick Harbor is going to beat you. So it's just going to be a different look. I went into the Louisiana game saying like there is no performance they could put up that's going to tell me the secondary is fixed from the issues that we saw against Kansas a little bit. And even though it was a fantastic game, like there's 4 passing yards allowed is insane, no matter who you're playing against. That's an incredible performance flat out. But I'm not convinced that the issues in the secondary are fixed until we see it against a better opponent.
I'll point this out too, just in that game when Nick Harbor faced Missouri last year, only 2 receptions, but it was a season high, 69 yards in that game. and his season long was also recording that game for 43 yards. Point out LaNorris Sellers' offensive numbers in that game against Missouri last year as well. He completed 21 of his 30 passes for 353 yards through the air, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Those 5 touchdowns were a career high. That 1 interception will actually go to the guy who's going to be on the cover of this podcast, and Dre Norwood, who got the ball in that one. 14 rushes for 45 yards. I know that's affected too just by sacks or going down in the backfield. Talking about the backfield now, Rashul Faison, like you mentioned, you told me before going into this, 7th year in college football, played at Utah State the last 2 seasons, 6 foot, 218 pounds, good thump there. Rushed for 40 yards against Virginia Tech in week 1. And then this past week, he rushed for 74 against Vanderbilt. Were there any mentions of him just in Drinkwitz's press conference?
Just kind of about the experience. I mean, he's a guy, you mentioned 7th year. That's the same, high school class as Jalen Catalon going the other way. And kind of the thing that's been pointed out repeatedly about Catalon is he's seen everything you're going to see on the field, right? He can diagnose kind of what play an offense is trying to run because he's seen it happen on the field a handful of times at least. That's going to be the same thing with Faison. I really don't know how to pronounce his name. And he hasn't been, astounding. 135 total yard or rushing yards through 3 games isn't incredible. But he's part of kind of a 2-headed backfield between him and Oscar Adaway. No, coming into the year, I think South Carolina was probably preparing to just go with Adaway as the main guy because there was some question about Faison getting an extra year of eligibility. That ran really late. I don't remember exactly when it got figured out, but it was well into summer or maybe even into fall camp before the NCAA basically agreed to let him play this year. He was, I think, trying to sue the league. And, he's a talented back. I think he's 25, which feels crazy for a college football player. But, he's seen whatever Mizzou's defense is going to try to do at least a few times, and that could very well make a big difference.
25 is not a bad age. Some of us are almost 25. Some of us are past 25. Before we get into our score predictions for this game, Kyle, we're going to get a quick read from our sponsors over at Rhoback. Rhoback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Even if you're watching with us on the YouTube, if you're hanging out with us, Kyle and I are both sporting some Q-zips right now from Rhoback. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletics across the country. Use the code MIZ20 on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off all of your new for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code MIZ20. And for those on the YouTube as well, you can see that some of this stuff is back in stock as well. The Mizzou Tigers polo, the Mizzou Game Day, the Hezzy hoodie is back as well. And then there's a new one too, the Mizzou helmet stripe collegiate Q-zip is in with this kind of white look, and then the yellow and black stripes across the middle. Still out of stock right now. Right now are the Mizzou Faroe Field, which is a cool look right there. And then the solid, just black Q-zip design for Mizzou. Getting into our score predictions, Kyle, I've been trying to stick with my predictions just each week. And I think you've been kind of doing that as well. Just kind of stick around those same numbers that we had in the preseason. I think this week's going to be a little bit different, and I could probably say that for you as well. We'll start with you and just what you think this score will come out to between Mizzou and South Carolina.
I expected my prediction to change a bit. There's some more confidence in Mizzou's offense than there was going into the season, probably a little less confidence in South Carolina's offense than there was coming into the season. But I looked back at my game-by-game predictions, and I picked Mizzou to win 27-21. I don't think that's ridiculous. sitting here now. I mean, Mizzou's put up more than 40 each game, so 27 might be a bit low for the Tigers, but this is also easily the best defense they've faced. So I think I'll increase a little bit. I do think it'll probably stick around a score to 2-score game. I'm not sure about that huge line that came out initially of, plus 13.5 or whatever it was for South Carolina. But I think I'll go with Mizzou 35-28. I think that feels right.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think this might be a touchdown game. For as many people that probably think maybe this could be a 2-score game, which is certainly possible, it's still your first test of SEC play. It's for, Bo Prabula's first game against an SEC opponent. It's interesting to see how he kind of responds, and they've done a good job about responding. They were down 21-6 against Kansas. I wouldn't put it past anyone to maybe come out just a little bit slow, but they try to play fast. You wrote about that this morning with Kirby Moore, especially just in that offense. So I'm very intrigued by, how they can come out not flat-footed, because that's a big issue that they've had. And I think it's a big positive. This game is at home too at the same point. Last week, South Carolina's defense in just South Carolina in total gave up 31 points to Vanderbilt, which is no longer a pushover. Diego Pavia is having a great season again, start to the year. South Carolina only scored 7 in that one. And of course, you lose your quarterback, LaNorris Sellers, for part of that game, and it's going to happen too. So looking at mine from the beginning of the year, and we posted these on the 24th of August. I was going back, looking at that 31-27 loss. This was the first loss that I put for Missouri on the season. I'm going to change that. I really like to stick with it. Just what I've done with the first 3 games. But I'm going to change it. I'm going to keep it close to, I'm going to say 31-23 in favor of Missouri. This will be the first game that they don't score 40 points, like you just mentioned, Kyle. And I think that's a fair one to kind of put in there. You want to maybe see Robbie Meyer hit a field goal in this one as well. Somebody who's had his ups and downs already, trying to take over for Blake Craig for the remainder of the season. And that's where I'm going to kind of stick with that one. And there was someone at The Athletic earlier in the season, before the season started, pegged South Carolina as a team that could possibly go 6-6. I don't think a lot of people bought into that, but there's probably some people that might buy into that now.
Yeah, I think probably a key thought I've had about this game is it's gone from, when you entered the season, a game that, it is a realistic chance for that first loss and a game you should win, especially considering how close last year's game was, coming down to the last seconds on the road. Now you get the home environment. It should probably, be the difference there if you swing the points the other way. I think this is now a game you really need to win if the Tigers are going to, do what they've set out to do this year, which is be one of the best teams in the country. I don't think this is a game you can drop anymore, especially if LaNorris Sellers doesn't play. I'll add in, if he doesn't, I'll drop my South Carolina score to 17 or so. If he doesn't play the offense doesn't change stylistically, but it's just not going to be as good. So I do think, this has become a must-win game in my mind for the Tigers. You've got a couple of games coming up, especially with the way it looks like the schedule is kind of swung a little bit. Came into the season with all the talk about how it was the easiest schedule in the SEC and all that. And that was always a little bit of nonsense in my mind, because even the easiest schedule in the SEC, I think BetMGM still had as the 20th most difficult schedule in the country. And then now, like you said, Vanderbilt's not a pushover anymore. Oklahoma's looked really good. Auburn's looked pretty good. Like all of those games that the Tigers won close last year are now on the road, and the other team looks a lot better than they did last year, or slightly better than they did last year in Vanderbilt. Like there's a lot of tough games down the road, and you really can't afford to drop one against a struggling South Carolina team at home now.
And for those that don't know, you'll get a better look, because we're talking about this preview in the sense that LaNorris Sellers will play in this game and be ready to start Saturday. But the availability report from the SEC does come out later today, reporting here on Wednesday. So we'll know a little bit more about where that is, where he kind of stands. But again, 6 p.m. Saturday against South Carolina for the Mayor's Cup. It's a sellout again, 16th consecutive home sellout. And this is also a blackout game too, with it being at night. They're going to try to get another blackout game in later in the season against Texas A&M, which was a big one against Oklahoma last year in that first weekend of November, the 9th, and now it's the 8th this year. But Kyle, anything else just ahead of this game? Anything else that people should know?
I think going into this game, we just about covered it. I will add, the 16th consecutive sellout guarantees a streak of 18 because UMass for homecoming and Alabama have already sold out. So that's a pretty fantastic run of sellouts dating to the 2023 game against Kansas State, and then Mizzou goes on the road for a couple of games for the first time this year. And if the Tigers are able to handle their business, you got Texas A&M and Mississippi State late in the season, and I think you probably have a pretty realistic chance to sell both of those out if the road games go as well as they could. So, very realistically looking at 20 consecutive sellouts by the end of this year, and that's pretty impressive.
Well, that's going to do it for our preview of the South Carolina game, Week 4 matchup. Opening SEC play, but we'll get back into homecoming for UMass next week, and we'll be back talking with you that. Kyle and I will both be at this game, so follow all of his coverage for the game day and have a good rest of your week and a good weekend watching the Mayor's Cup.